Hello, thank you for sparing your time in your busy lives to answer this questionnaire. Before we begin, I'd like to give you a little bit of context onto the matters at hand to help you better respond to the questions that we have in line for you. Now, this project is called a science and economic-based study on the net return on value and justification for allowing sustainable responsible mining in permanent forest reserves and environmentally sensitive areas. Now, there are a few words there that I think would cause a little bit of flinch in many of us out here. However, allow me a little bit of time to explain the direction and why we're conducting this study. Now, my name is Raja Shazrin Shah bin Raja Ehsan Shah. I'm a chemical engineer by profession, and I have been entrusted by the Malaysian Chamber of Mines and the Tin Board to coordinate this research. On the screen is the QR code, which will take you to my LinkedIn page, and feel free to connect with me if you have further questions on the topic that we're about to discuss today or any topic related to sustainability. Now, we have actually conducted three focus group discussions with several domains of experts to gauge feedback on the topic, and this was conducted physically. Now, on the 23rd of July, we had a discussion with the experts in biodiversity conservation, experts in environmental impact assessment and hydrology and water management. We also had sessions with socioeconomic development, regulatory framework and governance experts, community engagement and social license to operate experts, and mineral potential in permanent forest reserve and environmentally sensitive area experts. And this was done on the 24th of July. On the 24th of July in the afternoon, we had further discussions with experts who are from the sustainable land management, technological innovation and sustainable mining practices, climate change and mining, economic valuation of economic systems. Now, these were small groups of people which we had close contact and intimate discussions to get more input on the return on value model, which we hope will give us insights to whether it's justifiable to conduct mining activities in these two areas. However, we are aiming to get feedback from a larger group of people, which is why we are reaching out through this online questionnaire. Now, the project is conducted basically to identify or evaluate the feasibility and impact of allowing mining activities to be conducted in permanent forest reserves and environmentally sensitive areas. Now, this is no doubt a multidisciplinary approach, and we've taken that to be considered are the economic aspects, the environmental aspects, and the social aspects, which we hope to balance the economic development and environmental sustainability. And this shall be done through means of a return on value model, which we hope to give us insights into making an informed decisions on whether it is justifiable to conduct mining in these areas. Now, the focus group discussions is tailor-made to actually gauge expert insights into the building blocks which will make up the the return on value model. Now, I will be presenting the return on value model to set context so that you'll be able to answer the questions that we have installed in this questionnaire. However, the FGDs are not merely or not solely the methodology that we have employed. We have actually taken into consideration documentation and data through literature review and horizon scanning as well. Now, the objective of the focus group discussion that we have conducted, and hopefully we'll be able to get the same from this questionnaire, is to firstly to validate the key categories and subcategories that we have recommended to be incorporated into the ROV model. Now, the second objective is to assess the potential of impacts of mining activities on biodiversity, socioeconomic development, and environmental sustainability. Now, this is to be correlated as the direct and indirect costs and benefits, respectively. Now, this ROV is actually built based on a cost-benefit analysis, and we are looking into quantifying in dollars and cents the impacts and the benefits that are arising from mining in these activities. Now, the third objective is to evaluate the effectiveness of current regulatory frameworks and governance mechanisms to formulate the operationalization of the ROV model. Now, we have not included this into the questionnaire. We have not included the questionnaires that are related to the third objective. However, if you do have any feedback on this matter, please do include your responses in the open-ended question towards the end of the questionnaire. Now, the fourth objective is actually to identify the best practices and innovative approaches for sustainable mining. Now, these are what I want to call movers inside the ROV, because as we know, technology has developed over time and has developed tremendously. Now, these technologies may contribute towards the reducing impacts or disturbances from mining activities. So basically what we're saying is there are movers within the model which are driven by employing technologies and strategies in the mining practices. So just to get everyone on the same page, let's agree on a couple of definitions that we are going to be using throughout the document. The first is sustainable mining. Now, sustainable mining in the context of this research involves the practices which ensures long-term environmental health, economic profitability, and social equity. Now, I think this is very much different from the sustainable mining definition, which refers to the diminishing or depletion of the natural resources. We are here referring to the mining activities which are sustainable. Now, the other one is responsible mining, which involves ethical considerations, including transparency, accountability, and high ethical standards, which again involves the mining activities. The other one is net return on value, which is the limelight of today's discussion. And this refers to a metric quantifying net benefits of mining, considering economic, environmental, and social impacts. The last two, permanent forest reserves, are legally designated areas for conservation and sustainable management. And finally, environmentally sensitive areas refers to ecologically significant and vulnerable regions requiring heightened protection. Now, for this study, we have confined ourselves, we have drawn ourselves a little bit of boundary to make this study a little bit more feasible. Now, this is by far a starting point, I would say, and this is by far a large potential towards developing an approach, a systematic approach for us to make informed decisions in mining, in the mining sector. Now, we have confined ourselves to targeted minerals, and we are confining ourselves to two minerals, the rare earth elements and the primary tin. Now, for extraction approach as well for these two minerals, I think for the primary tin, we are confining ourselves to underground mining and open pit mining, whereas for rare earth elements, we are looking at in situ leaching mining. And these are, when we consider underground mining and in situ leaching mining, these are two approaches which have been considered to be less destructive, relatively. Now, for the areas in Malaysia, we've also confined ourselves to evaluating areas, mining areas within the state of Perak, Terengganu, and also Negeri Sembilan. Now, this is, of course, a starting point, a stepping stone. If we get good feedback and reliable outputs from the ROV model, we can extend the research to go beyond these three states. Now, this is where it comes into the main part of the discussion, where we are looking into components of the ROV model, the return on value model. Now, the ROV model, as I mentioned earlier, takes on the framework, or rather the approach of the cost benefit analysis, where you have on one side the cost and you have a benefit, and then you sum it up to have a positive or negative value, which would be the determining factor. Now, for the ROV components, we have actually compiled, or rather grouped, the subcategories into the main categories, which are direct cost, direct benefits, indirect costs, and indirect benefits, which we will see in the upcoming slides. Now, for the direct cost, you can look on the slide, which is on the second column. You will see that we have grouped the direct cost to be contributing from the capital cost, which involves the third column, which is actually the data required for us to quantify capital costs. Now, that involves the detailed budgets from the site preparation, machinery purchase, infrastructure development, initial environmental assessments. Now, for your feedback, you could recommend the addition or removal of subcategories, or even the additional data that would be required to be included for that particular subcategory. All right. Now, I'm not going to talk about the last column yet. Let's look into the second subcategory, which is the operational cost. Now, this includes considerations on the monthly or annual projections of labor costs, maintenance expenses, utility costs, supply chain logistics. And then the closure and reclamation cost involves estimates based on similar mining operations for decommissioning, land restoration, and post-closure monitoring. Now, the last part of the direct cost is the regulatory compliance cost, which covers specific legal and regulatory requirements, compliance audit costs, environmental monitoring, and reporting expenses. Now, these are the four elements, or the four subcategories of indicators that will contribute towards the quantifying of the direct cost of mining activities in environmentally sensitive areas and permanent forest reserves. Now, the last column, which is the life cycle stage, is where I want to take you. Now, we will see that these costs are not incurred at the same moment in time. For example, when you talk about capital costs, these may very well be upstream, where it involves pre-operation. Operational costs, on the other hand, refers to the operational life cycle during the extraction and the actual processing of these minerals. And when you talk about closure and reclamation costs, these occur typically downstream, which is post-operation, after the mine is being closed. And then when you talk about regulatory compliance, it involves costs that may be incurred throughout the stages. Now, when we take the approach of the cost-benefit analysis, I think the advantage that comes inherent to this approach is that you do not need to then quantify or put a weightage on the quantification based on which subcategory is more important or less important. However, having seen the life cycle stages, perhaps over a longer period of time, because certain mines may operate over a longer period of time, we may need to do some corrections, taking into consideration the net present value, for example. Now, the direct benefits includes the revenue from the mineral extraction, which is quantified by taking into consideration the forecasted production volumes, current and projected market prices, long-term sales contract. This is incurred during the operational, which is the extraction and the processing. Local economic stimulation. Now, this involves economic impact studies detailing job creation, wage enhancements, local business development supported by the mining project. And these occurs during, again, the operational life cycle of the mine. The taxes and royalties are applicable for the government, probably, during the applicable tax rates, which will be incurred, expected royalty payments based on extraction volumes and market prices. This also occurs during operational extraction and processing. Now, I would like to also take this opportunity to explain a little bit on the approach of the ROV. Now, we are taking the cost benefit approach of considering the return on value for the humanity or the country. So we're taking a very big kind of value stakeholders, return on value for the stakeholder, which is humanity or the world even, because as you can see, several benefits that are listed, the recipients of these benefits are somewhat different. Now, the next category is the indirect costs, and we have actually grouped this into two main groups. So indirect cost environmental and indirect cost social. Now, under indirect cost environmental, we have loss of biodiversity, where we are trying to quantify the cost of such disturbances to biodiversity. And these we hope to gain by looking at the pre and post mining biodiversity surveys, including cost benefits for biodiversity conservation initiatives. Now, as a reminder, this occurs upstream, probably pre-operation, and may even extend during operation. Now, the other one is degradation of ecosystem services. Now, this is a multidisciplinary approach, and we are very optimistic to look at the values. However, this will be crunch time later, I can imagine. So we're looking to determine, or we're looking to establishing the values for degradation of ecosystem services by looking at baseline data on ecosystem services pre-mining, estimated cost to replace or restore services such as water purification. The other one that we're looking at is environmental remediation, where we're looking at long-term costs for environmental remediation activities, including ongoing land and water treatment. Again, this is downstream post-operation. Regulatory and conservation value refers to legal protection, conservation status, regulatory framework, potential fines, and mandatory conservation contributions. Now, this occurs throughout the stage, throughout the life cycle stage, meaning upstream and during operation and post-operation of the mines. Now, this is the 4 elements or 4 subcategories which we hope will be able to establish the indirect cost involving environment. Now, the indirect cost social, we're looking at health impacts. We are looking at displacement and resettlement, impact on cultural heritage. Now, for health impacts, we're looking at health statistics from similar mining regions, projected healthcare costs, potential impacts on local health infrastructure. So this is again during operations. Now, the displacement of and resettlement, we're looking at numbers of communities and individual affected, costs associated with resettlement and compensation packages. Now, this occurs upstream during the site preparation. Now, for impact on cultural heritage, we're looking at cultural sites, cost of cultural heritage preservation, or compensation of affected communities. Now, this again also occurs upstream during site preparation. Now, these are the indirect costs which are related to the mining operations or mining activities in the environmentally sensitive areas and permanent forest reserves. Now, I think just to also explain that this is not exclusive to these areas only. However, the values may increase because these are sensitive areas particularly. The final one, which I think a lot of models out there have not included in their evaluation, is the indirect benefits. So the first one that we have decided to include in the ROV component, in the ROV model, is the contribution towards decarbonization. Now, if you see earlier on, we are narrowing our study to the rare earth element and also the primary tin, which actually contributes towards the development and the manufacturing of many equipments and technology which contributes directly to decarbonization. Now, this includes, wind turbines and even solar generators. Now, here we're looking at quantities of critical minerals used in renewable energy technologies, economic valuation of their contributions to decarbonization. Now, I would just like to take this opportunity as well to talk about when we talk about reaching our global sustainability goals, uh, the the carbon economy is looking to graduate itself by looking at two major components. I think quite well established. There may be more than two, but we're basically looking at electrification, and we're looking at hydrogen. And hydrogen is still at very much at its infancy at the moment, and electrification is the uh, more plausible bet at the moment. And we are looking at, as much as possible, incorporating renewable energy into that mix of energy, right? So this is why we have included this particular subcategory. Now, the other one is global impact on renewable energy deployment. This is looking into values and projections of renewable energy capacity enabled by mined minerals. Now, we need to look into studies linking mineral supply to climate targets. Now, the other one is technological and infrastructure development. This looks into case studies or projections of technology innovations spurred by mining infrastructure benefits to local regions. Now, this occurs during operation to post-operation, where you can actually see other multiplier effects of activities involving the mining sector, and this can occur during operation and post-operation. Now, the other one is economic diversification, which can occur during operation and a long-term impact even after the operation. And we're looking at studies on diversification of local economies post-mining, including the emergence of new sectors. We have two more, which is the enhanced trade balances, where we are looking at export data for mined minerals and analysis of the impact on the national trade balance. Now, the last one is the knowledge and skills development, where we're looking at the details on training programs offered, impacts on workforce skill levels, and long-term benefits to the labor market. Now, this makes up the components which goes into the indirect benefits, which we are trying to quantify. Now, this is just a visualization of the ROV components. Now, if you see on the far left, I think it's a little bit too small, but you have your own screen. So on the far left, you will see the list of the sub-indicators which we have presented earlier, which I've presented earlier. And as you can see, this will go into the individual components or categories, which we hope to go into a return on value model, which we will develop. Now, at the moment, the thickness of each ribbons are just arbitrary figures which we have put Now, eventually, when we do the actual quantification, we can actually make sense from the impacts that are arising from the individual subcategories within a particular area or a particular state even. Now, I think that concludes my explanation, and I do hope that you'll be able to provide us with some feedback on whether or not the approach that we're taking is right in your opinion, and do give us feedback on how whether the components that we have included in the categories and the data that we are looking into to represent those categories, whether those are, in your opinion, reasonable, and if not, whether you have more subcategories to include, and maybe perhaps suggestions on where we might get more data to make the input more representative. With that, thank you. We look forward to receiving your feedback and your questionnaires.